So here's another kind of thing I want to explore. And this is kind of actually one of the main things that actually got me teaching, because it's one of my main areas of interest. So, and this is a question of faith, actually. And the reason this actually really interests me is because of the power it has. Because faith, when people talk about it, really, they're talking about a state of mind. And they're talking about a very particular kind of state of mind. They're kind of talking about a kind of state of mind where you feel like God is there for you. You feel like the universe is supporting you, or you feel like there's flow, like spirit. There's spirit, like serendipity. You feel like life just all of a sudden is happening, and it doesn't matter what hardship is happening, it feels like it's meaningful, and it makes you incredibly resilient, and actually really deeply, profoundly happy. And so, so this is actually kind of like the main area of interest. I feel like that this is actually probably one of the most important things a human being can actually look at. And I think this is deep down inside what every human being is after, because this is what all the movies are about. Someone actually having this deep, profound center from where they come from that changes the world and actually makes them impervious to the outside influences because they come from within. And this is actually really kind of another word for it. You know, there's so many different ways this is described. You know, whether you call it awakening, or you call it courage, but the essential thing that people are looking for is actually the same. That you're driven from an inner sense of inspiration and direction, where you're self-directed, where you can figure things out, where you are not affected by the outside influences of life. And so, so this is kind of, you know, I want to say everyone's interest, because otherwise movies wouldn't be selling, because there's no movie about someone just actually always being directed and, you know, kind of not caring about that, and who wants to just actually follow everyone else. And right, that's actually not what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who had some difficulty, but then, you know, essentially the hero's journey, right? Where you had difficulty, you met the challenges, somehow you figured out how to overcome all those challenges, and then now you found this profound center that you can come from, where you can continue meeting these challenges and live the life that you want to live, and claim it, and influence the whole world from that place. And this is actually, the people who have this are the people who actually change the world, because they're not doing things from external influence, but they're actually doing things because they have a deep personal inspiration that keeps making them make choices that has certain effect. Instead of actually reacting to life, they actually respond to life with a sense of purpose. And so instead of like something coming in and going, oh, okay, like I don't want that consequence, so I'm going to go in this direction, you're saying, do I want this consequence or not? How is this related to my purpose? Is this something I want to do, face or not face? Oh, it's not related to my purpose. You know what? I can let that pass by. No problem. They don't necessarily fight. They don't actually, they let go oftentimes. Anything that's not related to a purpose, they let it go. But they say, oh, this is really difficult. But this has to do with my purpose, and this is important to me. I'm going to keep moving forward. And so, and that is the main wisdom. And so, how does someone get to this is actually the real question, isn't it? So this has been kind of the area of interest and something I've been studying. And when I first came to this, you know, I came to this through the scriptures and studying the scriptures. And so I thought that that's how everyone else got to this. But actually, that's not the case. So some people come through it, you know, by faith conversions. Some people come through it through meditation. And some people come through it by actually being profoundly depressed. And then in the midst of depression, having an insight. And then from that insight, actually waking up. So now, what is interesting is there are some commonalities between actually everyone who did this. And the commonality is the simple idea, is a simple thing where they were actually in the midst of something really rather difficult, or decision point, or they were in the midst of having to look at the nature of reality, which is actually oftentimes easiest to see when they were actually having to look at something really difficult. And a good example is, there's several people who've actually had this experience, but it doesn't always need to come to a disaster. That's actually the key point. But it does actually require a person to deeply, profoundly see kind of the nature of decision-making, or the nature of reality of what we're afraid of. It actually is a point where a person gets to deeply face their fears in some ways, or actually get to see what fear is about. And so faith is actually related to fear. Which is very interesting. And faith is actually related to what we deeply want. Which is kind of what we often tend to call purpose. So now there are many different ways to describe this. But kind of the principles or the kind of circumstances that brings about someone who has this is actually the same. And so either the person is going through something very difficult and is having to actually face all the fears. You know, it's actually not uncommon for you to read about people who were depressed for years, and they were just down in the dumps, and then they had a view of a moment of a sunshine and people walking by and things like that, and realizing things are actually okay, and all of a sudden realizing that things aren't that bad after all, and realizing in the midst of that person having gone through all the hardship that they're still alive, and all of a sudden realizing, maybe I don't need to stay here. And they're accepting all the difficulties that they've been facing and realizing that maybe they can feel differently about it. Like this one example. Another one is facing death. This is actually also very common, where you are looking at death. You're profoundly depressed about life, or you're having some really difficulties, and like you're thinking about dying or committing suicide, and you realize that actually that's not what you really want. You want to really live, and you realize that life is worth living, and all of a sudden the decisions that you make is towards life, meaning as in towards what you want, right? And so it's kind of, because life, whose life is it? It's actually your life. And so if you say you're going to live, you know, that means that you're going to start doing the things that you want. So it's about living, right? Because if you do the things that deeply, profoundly satisfies you, you come alive, right? It's like there's an awakening there. Or someone that you profoundly love dies, and let's say, for instance, actually dies, you know, in order to save you. Wow! All of a sudden, you feel like, oh my gosh, this person died for me. I need to live differently. I can't live just the way I have been living. I have to live for myself and this person who sacrificed themselves for me. And all of a sudden, you start living your life differently. You start living your life with meaning. And again, same thing. You face your fears, or you have something that allows you to face your fears. Like you're saying, wow, this person thought that I was worthy enough to die for. And so does that mean that my life is important? And if it is important, can I treat it the same way I have been treating it? And of course the answer is no. It's in a deep, profound emotional experience, right? So that's one way. Or let's say, for instance, you go through a very difficult challenge, such as you go join the special forces and you go through some incredible training, and you do things beyond your wildest imagination of, you know, anything you could do, and you're like, oh my gosh, Like, if I can do this, I can do anything. And you become accustomed to how you have to face hardship. And you realize that life is about something that you can just face, and you just have to face your fears. And so you can come through actually facing very difficult challenges. It's actually kind of, in my case, I've actually two profound experiences, actually 3 profound experiences. And the first one was actually kind of a faith conversion. And I realized, wow, you know, life can be very different. And the second one was actually through a challenge, and which is actually where, you know, I finished the system with my teacher, and I was like, when I finished, I was like, wow, I can do this. And so that was kind of one experience. And then the other experience that you can have is where you essentially have an increased capacity. And so through training, you keep training your state of mind, and your body aligns, and your energy starts becoming more, and then your brain changes, and all of a sudden the way you see your life changes. And you actually have a fundamental shift because you keep training to have a certain kind of view, a certain kind of filter. All the other examples I gave before, your filter changed. Your filter changed from scarcity filter to abundance filter. But in this last one, you become conscious of that, and then you consciously start always shifting and choosing towards the abundance filter. And so, and that was actually my third shift. Because of my training, I have to keep training. All of a sudden, I had this experience of just coming alive. Everything just became bright, and everything just started flowing. And there was this flow between me and everything else. And it was just a profound experience of, if you will, oneness or non-separation, however you want to talk about it. And it all of a sudden, it's just kind of just stayed there, because before, you know, you had moments, but this time was something fundamentally different. It kind of became my baseline. And that's actually one of the other ways that you can shift into it. But fundamentally, what you can see is that it's a combination between actually coming deeply in connection with your one, because that kind of state, you're basically continuing to actually look at what you want and go for it. And because of that, you're able to kind of just deal with fear differently. If it comes up, it's still, your main focus is actually towards your want. And then the other one is that for one reason or another, you got to actually face your fears in a profoundly different way, where you realize, I can't be looking at what I'm afraid of. I got to be looking at what's important to me and what's important to everyone else. And say, I got to go for living, or for purpose, or for the divine, or what I want. But divine, is a feeling. Like when you say, oh, the feeling of God, and that's what you want. That's what we want. It's the reason why people meditate. It's the reason why people look for that purpose. It's the reason why people pursue spirituality. It's the reason why people join religious groups. It's the reason why, actually, I like to say, why we try and have a great, meaningful job. Again, goes back to purpose. It's the reason why we try and have families. It's the reason why we do drugs, because we want to have this profound experience of mystery. And it drives us. So whether we use the word purpose, or whether we say live, or whether we say happy, or whether we say spiritual, literally, actually, it's an experience that we want. And we just come into clarity with that. And so, and once we come into clarity with that, then we actually start seeing life from that focal point of what we want. And then we can deal with the consequences of life, of what we fear, from a very profoundly different place, because we can say, oh, okay, this is coming in my direction. What can I do to feel this most important thing to me? So your priority becomes very clear. So this becomes your priority, number one priority. Priority number one. And then your fear becomes priority number two. And for most people, it's reversed. Your fear is priority number one, and what you want is priority number two. Which makes sense, actually, right? I mean, it's not a bad strategy, because if you stay alive, then you have a chance to go for what you want. And so it's really logical. It's actually really smart. It's the reason why our species is here. And from a species perspective, you just need a few people who are foolhardy, meaning as in just doggedly go for what you want at the risk of your life. But that's not such a good thing in terms of species survival. So what you really want is kind of for the rest of the species to kind of make sure that we stay alive and then go for what we want as much as we can within that. But what if actually you can do both at the same time and there's a balanced approach? And I like to say that's what a spiritual path is about, that balanced approach, to have both at the same time where you don't have to choose. And so I would say that this priority number one is more like, kind of like priority number one, prime one, and this is like priority number two is priority number one, prime two, meaning as in like, it's like the yin and the yang. It's like, you know, so like the priority number one, you know, is yin, priority number two is yang, or if you want, you can switch it, doesn't really matter. The point here is that, that you need both. And that's actually the only time a person feels whole and balanced. And I think this is actually where we're missing out, because we're trying to choose one or the other. Now, sometimes we don't have a choice to choose. Sometimes, you know, you're in a circumstance where you can't really have safety. Like your child is in danger and you need to jump into water to save your child, or whatever it is, you just run in. You know what's important to you. It's like, and it's profoundly meaningful and allows you to do great things. But those circumstances are few and far between. And just choosing for this without taking this into account, that just leaves a desolate life, an empty life. But what if, when, from moment to moment when we live out of this place, and while looking at this, while not losing sight of your number one important thing, you actually kind of make decisions to see what the best options are. And that makes for a great spiritual life, because there's balance. And all of a sudden, you live your life where there's flow, and you live a life where there's understanding and peace and just profound meaning. And so I just kind of wanted to just explore these things, and I wanted to say that these are kind of like the different approaches as to what allows you to have this faith-driven life. And if I were to kind of just look at the method of how you can get there, is you can actually get there through, if you will, practice. Just practicing this. You can actually get to there through a paradigm shift. By having a profound experience of having to face, if you will, death, and actually life, where you choose it, where you, how should I say this, where you get to make a different kind of choice, right? And then you actually also get to do it by facing challenge. And these three things is kind of actually a very interesting thing in life, because practice actually, when I said, like, you know, I kept meditating and things opened up, it actually goes to capacity. So your capacity can actually get to a point where you fundamentally, your capacity is such where this is the kind of experience you have. If you keep facing challenges, then you get better at facing challenges and you get skilled. But then your view can change for your experience of having made choices. And what this actually really is about is having a proper kind of, as a paradigm shift, a proper kind of view, which actually means that you understand the context of life. So, because whatever it is you're trying to do, you need actually three things. You either need capacity to do it, you need skill to do it, or you need to have context to be able to do it. Let's say, for instance, if you're trying to perform surgery, But let's say, for instance, you're lacking the context as to what technique to use while you're performing surgery, then even if you know the technique and if you have the ability to do it, you can't do it. But let's say, for instance, you have all the information, you studied it, but you don't know actually the specific technique, and you have the ability to perform, you can't do it. If you have learned a skill and you know it, and you've learned when to use it, but you don't have any energy, and therefore you can't perform it, you don't have the ability to do it, you can't do it. So in any circumstances, you need these three things. And if, in my case, I first came to it for a paradigm shift, like I had a realization, oh, I can't choose death. I have to choose life. Or actually, ironically, I'm sorry, it's actually the other way around. It's like I have to say, I have to choose death. If I try and live, which is kind of looking for the benefits, then I will die. I have to choose death, meaning I have to face my fears. And I profoundly understood, so I have to face death. And then when I faced death, I came out on the other end alive, if you will. And so it's actually kind of just the context of understanding you can't keep making choices based on scarcity. You have to keep making choices based on abundance. You have to keep making choices not based on fear, but on what you want. So you have to face your fears, right? So choose death, then you'll have life. And so that's kind of like a paradigm shift of view. It's like, oh, you know, it's like where people say, God is there for me. And so because they're looking at that, then they can walk through what they're afraid of. You may not have capacity. You might be shaking like a leaf. And you might be bumbling through it because you don't have any skills, but you'll learn it along. And so this view was very, very important. So this is having context, like a paradigm shift. And then the skills. So as I studied these things with my teacher, I had to naturally overcome things. Like the challenges that he put in the way, and I got practice and I got better skill, and I started finding out, what do I do? Like when I said, for instance, like if something happens, not to panic, but just to sit still until you calm down, just for 5 minutes, and then recollect yourself, and then actually kind of look at what you want, and then look at you know, what the options are, and then look at what the consequences are, and then from there to make a choice, right? Those are like skills, those are skills. So I learned how to face them, and once I had the skill, I was like, oh, okay, I can face any challenge. And then over the years, after I kept training and meditating, all of a sudden I had a physiological change, and then it's just a base state changed. And now those three work together to actually bring about the kind of faith that we're talking about. And so what I like to say is, don't trust this, but kind of look at this and look at all your heroes and see whether these are present. And what you'll find is that these are present in whoever you're looking at. Some of these happened, or all of them happened. So anyways, so I kind of want to just explore the idea of what creates a transformed individual that lives a life, you know, from this place. And that it actually can take just a moment of notice, that it can just shift over. Because, you know, I talk about capacity, I talk about skill, I talk about, you know, all these different things. But it's really interesting. You don't know when you're going to fall in with the capacity. You don't know when you're going to fall in with the skill. And you don't know when you're going to fall in with the view. As a matter of fact, you could be just a moment's notice away from finding the part of you that just goes into this miraculous state of flow. It can just happen in a moment's instant. You know, we say that the training is actually not necessarily what gets you there. The training just gives you the opportunity to fall into it more often. And so we kind of look at it as, it could happen any moment. It could be today. It could be right now. Right? And so that's capacity. It can be happening anytime. Skill is the same thing, actually. You know, those 4 steps. Sometimes people don't realize it, but, you know, there's unconscious competency. All of a sudden, something makes sense, and you start just making decisions from there. You don't even know why, but you're doing it. Moment's notice. Or it could be today. As you're watching this, you'd be like, oh, one of these may click, and it could be today. So don't look at it like in the future, because that's actually kind of fear-based mindset. Oh, I don't have it today. I'm not the kind of person who has it today, but maybe in the future. And that's actually not the case. You have to look at yourself as, I'm the kind of person who could have it right now, right? And that's kind of like the view also. And so anyways, so I just kind of wanted to add this last portion. This is not for the future. This is actually for now. One of the reasons I actually am making this is to explore this concept, but also to increase the chances for anyone who's watching this, for just to fall into this, because all of a sudden it made sense. So, okay, thank you. Hopefully you found this interesting and helpful, and hopefully you'll fall into this.